evening, and welcome to Social Action Sundays, a presentation of the Greenwood Itabena Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated's Social Action Committee. And this evening, we're doing a brand new thing. We are here before you under the auspices of Women for Progress Media. This is a collaboration that we pray will empower us to reach even further, to spread the net even further as we seek to inform, empower, and inspire those listening. I'm Curressia McFarland Brown. I have the privilege of being the host, and tonight I have the privilege of interviewing a phenomenal young woman. Now, I'm going to go to her bio and tell you a little bit about her, but I think as you listen and as we begin this conversation, you will get to know her and you will appreciate her expertise, her insight, and you will appreciate the phenomenal woman within her. Michel'le McDowell is a native of Greenwood, Mississippi. She's the mother of two amazing children, Kinsley W. and McKenna W. She's a graduate of Mississippi State University, where she earned her degree in criminology and sociology. She is a corrections professional. She's held numerous positions, including deputy warden and warden of programs. She's passionate about criminal justice reform, prison ministry, and helping individuals become the strongest versions of themselves. So tonight we say, welcome, Miss Michel'le. Welcome back to Social Action Sundays, but welcome to this platform, the Mississippi Women for Progress media platform. Again, we extend our sincerest gratitude to Women for Progress of Mississippi for allowing us to share. So I've done a preliminary introduction. Tonight, we'll talk about a couple of things. We want to talk about your work in corrections. In fact, not your work, your ministry in corrections, because I understand it's more than work. But October is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we want to talk about why that's important, why it's important that we have this conversation, which is not always an easy conversation to have. So please share with us your background in the way you so desire.
I thank you for the warm words of encouragement as well as that warm invitation. I feel more than like we're family at this point. And so I know this conversation will be nothing more than just amazing. As you stated already, this is not my first time here, and I would be disheartened to not say that, hey, every time I come on this platform, something favorable happens to me. So I know how to stay connected to the favor, which is you. Because the last time some things happened that were supernatural. And so I just believe in God that the same thing will happen this round. There's elevation that has been all around my life. I've been able to open up some new doors and avenues for myself career wise. I've jumped headfirst kind of in the advocacy world. And it's all just based off of the things that I've seen, the things that I've learned over behind the wall or in the world of corrections. A lot of people only have knowledge and wisdom from TV, media, or if they don't have a family that have been incarcerated. So I live to educate people. I live to help them understand a world that suffers so much judgment and biasness. And so it started. I don't know, as a kid, like I always say, my mom used to always watch Dateline 48 hours, and she was a correctional officer for years. And so just bonding with her over those moments of watching those shows, I always wondered, why did people do the things that they do? And initially, I thought I was going to work for the FBI, but I don't think I ever would have passed that physical fitness test. And so after leaving college, I decided after 3 years at Mississippi State, being in kinesiology, listening to other people saying, hey, go be a physical therapist. There was my junior year, Christmas, right before the break, and I had a breakdown. I mean, like no other. And I was so unhappy and I was so miserable. And I remember just being on the phone crying, talking to my mom, and she just said, come home. And there was another person on the phone, and they were like, yeah, come home. But it was the way that they said come home. It was a come home like I knew you weren't gonna make it down there. It was gonna be too tough. Just come home. And so after I hung up the phone, I realized something. I said, I'm down here suffering almost on academic probation, doing something I don't even want to do, and I'm not even passionate about it. I'm gonna be in debt behind it. And so I changed my major to criminology and sociology. I graduated. And then the Lord opened up the doors for me to actually work at one point in time with my mom at the prison that she was in. And then it transformed my life from teaching alcohol and drugs to being able to start with the Department of Corrections. And the work has kind of just pulled me in itself. I never thought going in that I would just stay in one lane. I knew there was so much that could be done. And most people, when think about corrections, they think about the officers, but there's so many categories, there's so many ways to be effective. And so there was a young lady, well, there was a seasoned professional at the time. Her name was Miss Goohurst, and she always called me her diamond in the rough. And she was so hard on me, and I was a contract worker. If I sent the email, she would send it back, corrected 5 and 6 times. I'm like, if I had a suggestion, she would push me to dig deeper and finding a solution. It wasn't just a surface of how we could fix things. And so over the years, I kind of figured out that she was basically snowballing the effects of what would turn long term for me as far as reaching my goals and being able to be more than just an average person there. Some people clock in and that's it. But she was pushing me at that point in time to see outside of the box, to expand myself, to stretch my capacity. And she was teaching me to never settle at that point as well. And so that was kind of what embarked me on like my first big girl job, my first big girl promotion, and stepping into the realms of the rooms where decisions were made. And I've just watched things just continuously happen for me. And so meeting the people, meeting the families, meeting advocates, and just like I said, my own niche of my own story of things that I've been through and endured. I have a compassion that only comes from God for people that are incarcerated and the people that are affected by it. And then when you turn around and you start really looking at the facts in Mississippi, not just what is portrayed, not just what is put out there, but I mean the real facts. I really had to sit down for a moment when I was on a job during reentry, and I was over 33 counties. When people got out of prison, there were really limited resources. And so I'd always heard people talk about, well, people should do better and they should try harder not to go back. But when there are actual systems and actual stumbling blocks in the way, or we have laws that actually catapult them into returning, this is how it happens. We talk about
Right.
crime in our communities, but we don't get to the root of how these things actually happen. And it's like we'll start the work, but we don't finish it. And so I started to see over and over again the same people year after year, season after season. It went from me being pregnant with my youngest daughter to there was actually an offender who came back after she was born. I went through a marriage. There was offenders that were there when I was married. They came back after I was divorced. And I'm like, we almost started to be, a coexisting family here. But this is an issue. I shouldn't see you during every different season of my life. And so it pushed me to want to really get behind the field of digging and plowing to see what can we do, especially with the next generation coming up. I thank God for the people that were ahead of me who started the work, who plowed. But people in my generation, this millennial, we've got to step up to the plate now. And so we've got to put our hands on it. And if we ever want to say the generation behind us, now is the time to do the work more than ever. And it takes community and it takes connections and it takes conversations like we're having tonight to do that.
You know what? You have touched on just in introducing who you are and your passion to us. You've touched on so many issues. You've touched on that need for criminal justice reform. You've touched on the need for us to understand and seek to understand those systems that are disadvantageous. And I guess I wouldn't have to say not to our advantage, or those that keep us in that cycle. It's something that oftentimes we don't pause to discuss. We don't pause to think about. We just say, here are individuals who have made some decisions that were the wrong decisions. They're here. But then we expect that after they've served their time, we expect them to come out and be brand new people. But there are no systems in place to assist in that light or in that regard. And so it's important that we address it, and particularly insofar as women are concerned. And I know that your work has been tailored, or there's a special ministry that you have, a prison ministry in that regard, speaking to women. Um, how did you, and I know your story, okay? So I'm getting ready to bring us into your story and how the work that you're doing now aligns with your not only your life experiences, not only experience coming out as a sociology and criminology major, but your personal life experience that made it clear to you or that reinforced that passion that you have for prison ministry. Share that with us if you would.
So I've always been, especially in my field, like people say, light in a dark place. I'm always a cheerful one, happy one. People would always come to me with their problems. I always had encouraging words. So that part of me was always there. And it took in 2020 for my mother to pass. And she, for people who do not know, she was murdered due to domestic violence by somebody who was formerly incarcerated. And so during that point, I really hit two stumbling blocks. Number one, because I saw my mother fight through so many battles, emotionally, mentally, over the years. And though I love my mother, she was not the best version of herself that she could have been based on those battles. So I never held her hostage on it, especially now that I'm older, because I understand healing. I understand generational wounds, generational curses. I understand what you do not deal with at the root will potentially continue to grow, and you will keep going through life and you will be functioning, but you will not be fully functional. And so as mothers, sometimes we do the best that we can out of the place that we are. And so after she passed, I was stuck with the dilemma of being hurt because everybody was saying, "Oh, think about the good times," and my mind was saying. I mean, I watched my mama go through a lot. My great aunt raised me. I didn't have the memories like everybody assumed that I did. I was raised by my great aunt, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother's house as well. But I didn't have those memories, girl trips, a lot of pictures. Like she was young when she had me. She had to work two jobs. So that was the part I was already battling with, the voids, the wounds. And I knew how I felt growing up. And so when I had my first daughter, I gave her to God. I continuously prayed that, hey, the same relationship that we had um, growing up, well, that I had growing up and that I had seen other women in my family suffer through, I was determined not to have that. And so if I stayed wounded, if I stayed in the pit of grief, I knew that I would never have that chance with my daughter. And I had two daughters at the same time who were also with me, who also witnessed the murder. And so it was essential for me to heal because I'm the leader in my house. If I didn't stand up, I knew they weren't going to stand up. I had already given them a foundation in faith. I had already given them a foundation in who God was in their life. They knew who He was. So at that point in time, I had to kind of fast forward my grief in order to make sure that they healed. And then, in the sense of being somebody who absolutely loved corrections, my children have grown up around incarcerated people, have grown up around prisons. And so, if I were to allow that one person to stop me, to keep me in fear of never going back behind walls, or and I've never been judgmental. Most people tell you, um, if they've ever told me why they're incarcerated, it's because they chose to tell me. I never judge. I never want to know your backstory because at the end of the day, I truly believe in redemption. And I have seen people without a criminal record do criminal activity and things and be evil hearted. And I've seen people who actually have some of the most heinous charges. But when I say they are renewed in the mind, when I say they have compassion, when I say you can go in and feel the embrace of just hope and peace around them because they have truly settled with those issues and are not that same person anymore. So I couldn't judge that one person because I understood him doing that was attached to stop me at the door of my destiny. I would never be able to look at people the same. I would never be able to go forth. And then what was I to do? I went to nursing school before. I told you I tried to do kinesiology and physical therapist. I mean, I hated it. But there was nothing that actually gave me life or made me feel fulfilled, or nor did I carry the burden like I do um, for anything else besides this. And so it was a conscious decision that I had to make to heal. And so I spent about a good year with the Lord, and He just took me on a healing journey. I mean, from childhood trauma to things that I had done and said. And so I came out of that a new woman. I think it was the refiner's fire, as they like to,
Yeah.
say. And it did something to me. And so in the midst of that, I was actually supposed to be relocating. Well, my job at that time had asked me to stay around to help with the women's prison that was opening in the area. And so prior to that, my first job that I ever had was in a girl center. I vowed from that day forward to never work with women a day in my life. Those teenage girls gave me a run for my money. I was fresh out of college. I was small. A lot of them were big. They took a lot
Oh,
of medicine, so they
they
were
were trying you.
strong.
They were going to see
I
what you were made of.
that
They,
was an experience that I don't ever want to relive, and I truly have another level of compassion for those that do. But those were my words based on my experience in that girl center. And so even when they said that the women were coming, I was very reluctant. I was not happy about it. I can be honest, I was not. But something happened. I was in my office one day, and the day that the women moved, they moved them in portions. I walked to the back. I don't remember if I was going to somebody else's office or what, but I walked to the back, and it was like I was in shock because I was so used to seeing that facility house men. I had never seen women walk the grounds, and here it was like 50 women, and it was almost like they were shell shocked because they were in a new location in a new area, and all I could see was just brokenness and hopelessness and lost people. And I just went home that crying to God. And I said, God, what do you want me to do in this situation? And me and him talked, and he said, hey, I need you to help my people. And I said, okay. I said, God, if you give me those women, then I will be faithful to them. And I made a covenant from that day with God to take care of those women. And so that's what sparked my whole relationship ministry with women. Like I had been in ministry in my local church for years. I had done other things, brunches and motivational speeches. And I knew women's ministry was tied to my life because I had done things outside of work. But at that moment, it was like God showed me, Michel'le, you're supposed to do the both. You don't turn off who you are in Christ just because you're at work. This is the best time. This is the time where you really can do ministry because you're talking about the lost, the least, those that don't believe, those that have given up on me. So it was like he hit the light and said, go. And I did. And it started from just listening to him. There was a zone of several different women. And specifically, he told me, he said, go in one zone and just start praying, start talking to them. So I did. I went to one specific building for about a good month. I went in that same zone every day and I prayed with those one women. Well, it started as a circle, then it caught fire. Next thing you know, people's like, why you only go in there every day? When you gonna start coming out of zone? And
what
it
about
just
us?
went from there. And just building relationships and rapport with them. To even, like I said, when they had visitation, my kids were there meeting their families. My kids got to play with their kids, and just understanding the need for women support in Mississippi. I was so unaware for years the way that the women have been left behind. And so, not that I'm biased, but the need is so much more severe for them. In Mississippi, you have only basically 2.5 places for women to go in it when they're incarcerated. So let's just say you and I have had an altercation with the same facility.
Right.
Well, one of us has to go because we both can't stay on the grounds. Well, you get shipped to one, I may stay. Well, if you get in trouble at that facility, even though I may be settled, doing well where I am, we got to switch. And we'll have to keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because the options are so limited. It's only 2.5, where men have regional facilities. They have other state facilities. I mean, they have county jails that they can go to for work programs, CWCs. Like, and I was just like shocked. In working all those years, I never thought about it. They never crossed my mind.
Right.
So sometimes you have situations come in your life to where you would be less than a person or less than a woman if you didn't act on it. And so for me, encountering them was one of those situations. I can never turn a blind eye to sitting amongst them. I can never turn a blind eye to the issues that came right in my face every day from encountering them. And so for me, I made covenant with God, and I fear God. I'm not like everybody. I truly fear Him, and I plan to always be a good steward over whatever He gives me. So when I asked God for them, that meant even after release. That meant in my capacity, outside of my capacity. And so it stretched from being somebody on the inside that's supportive to now on the outside. My phone rings non-stop. Whether it's just somebody wanting to tell me they got their kids back, or they got into a program, or they got a new job, or just connecting with outside resources, because people do not understand the levels of healing, restoration, and redemption that happens when you continuously support somebody through the process. And going
You
back to that thing
know,
again, they're already
let me
stumbling
go back.
blocks.
I
They're
want to
already
go back with you. let me walk back for a moment, because I think there's, and you shared this with me in a conversation a couple years back, but it's the idea that we forget that though they're incarcerated, though they may have made a decision, and they it might be there, you know, under for a reason that they might be innocent, or they may have made the decision and they're dealing with the consequence of that decision. But we forget that these are mothers, their daughters, their sisters, their aunts, their nieces, they're human beings. And we sometimes have a tendency to look at those who are behind the walls as just people behind the walls, not understanding that there is a level of support needed during that period in their lives, but what happens afterward, even when they've served their time, even when they're ready to come back into in our communities, are we as communities ready to receive those? And this is whether they're men or women, but do we have the resources and the systems in place to receive them, and to allow them to thrive after that period? Or is there more? Because when you talk about women reaching out to you even afterwards, your ministry to them continues. But when you think about the state of Mississippi, what should it look like? Ideally, what should it look like in terms of the supports and services for women post sentence?
It should look like communities connected. And so I'm a firm believer in, um, if I don't have it, but I know someone that has it,
Okay.
setting up systems that would give me a safe handoff into a supportive person who actually has it. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of people don't know. I worked in community corrections for quite a few years. A lot of people don't understand that community corrections exist. And so those people work with everybody who is already outside. A lot of times when I've sat at that desk and I've called churches and I've called nonprofits, these people will advertise that these are the services they provide, but they'll tell you, no, we don't have it. We'll pray for them. Or they're pick and choose at which time of the year that they want to go forth saying. You need some consistent people that are willing to do the work. And everybody cannot be in the forefront of doing the work. I love the balance of having public display and private. Because if I'm always in the front, I don't have any time to work. And so
Right.
you'll see during certain seasons where certain people or certain organizations come to the forefront, but during the year. And even if you're out of resources, I'm networking is everything. I feel like you should be able to pass that person on to another organization. But we don't do that because we want to be known as the only one. So we drop the ball as far as a lot of nonprofits and organizations with that. As churches, I've always said ministry is outside of the church. And we have a displaced population when it comes to incarceration. So we don't think about those. We don't think about those who actually, and incarceration has no look as well. So let me break that up. A lot of people think you can look at people and tell they've been to prison. You can't. You don't know if you have several people who are in your Sunday morning congregation who have family members that are incarcerated, they need support. Who have children whose parents are incarcerated, they need support. Who are formerly incarcerated and it's their first time in service with their family, setting aside even additional support, whether you are a mental health specialist, whether you own a rental house, things like that within your local congregation can help people. And making those announcements during Sunday morning. We have a specific division for those that have been displaced or those that are formerly incarcerated. They need clothing. They need money. When they come out, most of those people are already in the hole, whether it's back child support or whether it's on additional fees and fines. On top of this being behind with everything that's happening in society. So let's say Joe Blow or Mary gets out after 20 years. Mary's parents have died. Mary no longer lives in that same house that she grew up in. She can't find her birth certificate, social security card. There's a chance she may or may not have received it prior to being released. When Mary comes out, she owes that probation officer to monitor her. Mary doesn't have ID, so Mary can't get a job at all. Mary has kids. She wants to get them back in custody. Mary also needs somewhere to stay. So understanding that those families need additional assistance because you technically have to carry the weight of someone that's not working. may want to work and also be battling some PTSD and other issues of feeling like dead weight to the family because you want to contribute, especially after being away at all those times. So in our local community churches, we can offer rides to people, help them to get jobs and transportation because a lot of them don't have them. We can have clothing closets within our local churches. Those are things that are quick fix. And when it comes to even just mental health, like the amount of women that I have seen that have never healed from abuse, molestation, rape, who may not have been treated, may not have been diagnosed, people who service those type of fields, I think especially if you have that skill and that grace to be able to offer it as a support services, whether you have your own ministry or your own office that's dedicated towards counseling. I just think whatever capacity that you can help putting their resource out there because it's a need for it at every single level. And so we've also got to develop streams and ways to navigate through. How do we know who's coming into that community? How do we work with corrections officials or corrections respondents on creating systems that hand people off? I always like to encourage the local mayors and city councilmen. You have jobs for the cities. I absolutely love and adore what they do in Greenville. I have a friend that has a transitional home over there slash transitional shelter, but they already have set up within their local city government how to hire those who have been formerly incarcerated. And
Okay.
guess what? Nobody else can get those jobs. So just like here, you see those guys on those garbage trucks, why not we set beside 10% or 5% of those employees that work for the city for formerly incarcerated? Because if they can work around the state and do those jobs, why can
Mhm.
we not set up countries? Why can we not set them up for success when they come back? I was having a conversation with someone who was over their economic development and housing in the area. And I was bringing up the fact that those that are incarcerated have such a huge issue with housing because 9 times out of 10, you have a felony on your record. Most housing um, companies, apartment complexes will not honor that, no matter how long it's been. And then just when we talk about development, even in our area, that's something to put on the table when builders or contractors come and say, we want to build 30 houses in the vacant lot over there. Well, can we set aside 10% of those houses, or can we make them special for those who are formerly incarcerated? Because housing is a niche. If you have, and I can always talk about our area and our statistics. Um, we have around 10 to 15,000 people in our area. Out of those 10 to 15,000, you may have about 3,000 that are actually on probation and parole. So they have different stipulations than the average person when they go apply for a job, when they try to get their own house. It could even be so simple as I want to go back to my mom's house, but she stays near school if I'm a sex offender. If I'm also in the company of those who have a criminal record, because you may have family members, I can't be around them. I can't be around open containers. What if my dad drinks? It's just so much that can easily snowball them back into that same cycle again. And so I feel like we don't have enough conversations um, with longevity about what the root of the issues are and how can we solve them. And you're never going to be able to do it all at once. But if we break
Right.
it apart, if we take it by sections, if somebody has said, well, hey, I have 2 vacant houses, I'm willing to, house them, or I'm willing to rent to them. If somebody says, hey, well, I have an old van, well, I'm willing to go and work with those who need transportation and drive them around on Mondays to go look for a job. If somebody says, hey, I have extra clothing or I have extra time so I can babysit, all of that helps because their family needs support as well. Incarceration is not cheap. People don't understand that. Yes, you have tax dollars that pay for it, but you also have a lot of money that is spent, whether it's phones, whether it's commissary, all that money comes from the family trying to support their little ones. And so they're stretched thin. So even just taking the initiative to go the extra mile. There was a ministry that I was working with, and they just specifically wanted to drive people when the women moved here. A lot of them were from the coast. So when they moved them in this area, it was a stretch as far as transportation. Well, they
Right.
agreed to take their van, meet in Jackson for those who could not, didn't have the funds to make it. But if you could get to Jackson, you could get on that van and they'll transport you the way through. They would put you up in a hotel if you wanted to stay the night if the journey was just too long, because you have some people who are elderly, who are disabled, but they want to come see their loved ones. There was another ministry. They actually took on the task to bless women whose children were graduating. And that's a critical part that we don't think about. When that child graduates kindergarten, even up to college, and your mom is dad is not, or dad is not there, but to have a ministry say, we're blessing you on behalf of your mom who's incarcerated, or your father who's incarcerated. So everything that we need on the outside, they need on the inside, and
Right.
vice versa.
Well,
It's
I don't
double.
think that goes back to just that humanity within us and recognizing, because you sat here, I started making a list and then I stopped because I was like, this could go on and on. The
Listen, you have to
for
stop me.
you,
I'm already a
well, wait a
long-winded
minute. No,
talker,
no,
but I
I'll
get
let you talk
excited.
because I don't even need to answer you any questions. I let you have it and let you go because you've given us a wealth of information, particularly for those listening. I'm thinking about not only churches, I'm thinking about individuals, I'm thinking about nonprofits, I'm thinking about those with a heart to serve, those who, and it comes with recognizing some of these things we don't think about, that when you just talked about blessing those who have children who are graduating, it's just remembering that these are people, these are human beings, and we can't in our minds, sometimes we build walls in our minds and we think, well, if we do something like you said seasonally, if we do something around Thanksgiving or Christmas time,
Christmas.
that's enough, right? And it's not. There some of the things we take for granted and things that we just do, we neglect, or we forget that there are individuals who don't have those privileges. And something as small as helping you to recognize or acknowledging a child graduating would have to make them, if you're sitting inside a prison cell or the four walls of a correctional facility, and you're missing all of these moments in your life. And again, I don't care what you've done, if you're there and it's a consequence of a decision you've made. I'm not saying, we shouldn't accept those consequences. But what I'm saying is, I don't become less of a human. I don't become less of a woman or less of a man because this has happened to me. And particularly if we expect that once individuals have served their time, they come back into the community and it's voila, everything's fine. It's not, and we understand that. For us, one of the things that we focus on, we talk about voting rights. We talk about that fight to make sure that people are their right to vote is being restored, especially now in this. I think it now every day is political season in our nation, but we think about issues like that. I know that there's been some discussion around the laws with regard to women who give birth while they're incarcerated. And the amount of time that they're allowed to spend with the newborn. We look at some of those larger things, but we don't, I believe, pay enough attention to those what we would consider small things to us or routine. They're not routine for those who are incarcerated. They're not even routine once you talk about integrating back into the community that you've left behind. And I want to go back as well, and you tell me, because you talked about your healing journey. The other part of our conversation tonight has to do with domestic violence awareness, um, and you shared your story with us, and part of that introductory, or our the introduction to our conversation. So let's and I'm looking. Um, you said something to me um, in an earlier conversation, and you were talking about part of the healing had to do with, well, you witnessed your mother's um, your mother's death. You witnessed this person who took your mother's life, but you said something as when we discussed that previously, and it was that you recognized that he wasn't ready. He was not prepared when he was released from prison, even though he was released, he didn't have what he needed to prepare for that release. Tell me about that. Do you remember that part of our conversation
Oh
and
yes,
what
ma'am.
you were?
So that's my fuel behind my fire every single day. I
Okay.
had sat in a place where for years I had been pushing ideas, programs, and I knew the cracks already, especially from working there. But in that situation, we were actually held hostage and kidnapped for about 2 hours prior to him murdering her. And like I said, I've taught cognitive behavior, anger management. I've pretty much am always the voice of reason when people do get in trouble. I'm a great de-escalator, so I use every professional and personal, test that I could. And I was just listening to him, and I was just watching him, and some of the behavior that he was displaying, and some of the things that he was saying, just showed me at that moment like he really was not ready. He should have never went home. And I can boldly say that because I have boldly also stood as an advocate for some people who should go home because I knew they had done the work on themselves. But this person who had sat here and done 30 years learned absolutely nothing. Because in a moment where you could have turned around, in a moment where he had joined church, in a moment where he had a job, he had all the checkbox lists. I'll say that much. When we talk about people who are released, he had a supportive family. He still chose to go back to what he knew. And so that's a systematic issue. And I know that because when people are incarcerated for so long, especially if we're really not putting in the work behind it, those people have PTSD, trauma. Even if I'm not a dog, I will become a dog because of what I'm seeing. If you put people in survival mode, they are going to survive. I've seen the smallest of the small turn into a gorilla because of the situation around them. And so that's why I go back to it's very important about being transparent and real about the conditions and the state of our prison systems. We cannot continuously say what we're doing because it affects people's lives. And I'm not the only one. There have been several other people who've had, people to get released from prisons, go back and do another crime or commit the same type of crime. And we wonder how. It's because the rehabilitation and the healing never broke through. And so I had access to his records. I went back and looked. When I looked at the 30 years, there was no portfolio of programs that you had accomplished, graduations. There was a job or two and several write-ups. So I'm saying, how does this person even qualify to get parole? But then I know people who have stacks of degrees and we're not letting them out. And so it became redundant to me then. Like, no, no longer can I sit and be quiet or second guess myself or also go against the grain when it comes to speaking up because I've been affected by this. I've seen it on both sides. I've been a victim and I've also been someone who's sat inside of this system and been I say make covenant relationships with people because I truly believe in everything being divine intervention. I believe that God has purpose in my life and this is my ministry and my calling. So when I've sat amongst families and heard their stories of the things that they've had to deal with, when I've talked to individuals who are post release and they say, well, hey, my family thinks I'm crazy because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm still getting up pacing the floor. But if you're used to going to breakfast at 3 o'clock in the morning for 10 or 15 years, nobody else in the house understands that that's not something you could just break overnight. If people say, well, hey, my family doesn't understand that I have a tendency to not want anybody to come in my room and touch things. But when you are incarcerated, your things and your possessions are everything because that's all you have. And so that survival and animal mode, I don't know where we got this notion that we should terrorize people in prison. The sentence is what they are supposed to do. We are not supposed to torture them. We are not supposed to torment them. We are not supposed to put them in survival mode. That's why it's called corrections or rehabilitation. So those things have to go through. But the humanity part has been stripped because we focus so much on the crime and not on the person. Crime starts in your community before that person ever comes to prison. So at the same time, and we can go biblical on it. When God sits one down, another one is raised up. The same thing with people who work on that side demonically or oppressed. If a drug dealer is in your community and we send him to prison, another one will be raised up. So we've got to start doing stuff at the root in our communities. Why are these people selling drugs? Is it because the home is broken? Is it because this person doesn't have a mentor, a father, a mother? Is it because of what they're watching? Is it because we no longer are concerned about our neighbor having food in our houses? There are so many issues that people battle, and when they get on that side and they have a sit down, they release it. And the stories are unreal. I know people that have been shot, drove their own self to the hospital, sat in the house, did drugs with their grandmamas and granddaddies, and found their loved ones dead and never got therapy. You got to heal from that. It torments you and it terrorizes you. And so you become angry. You become enriched with all of this feeling of selfishness and pride and ego that you don't need people if the people in the community have broken you or not seen you or made you feel displaced first. And this is how people can break into other people's houses and not, having a reverence for the fact that that's somebody's property. Because 9 times out of 10, those people don't know what that sense of having or ownership is. They've had to survive. So they do things out of a need. And then some people have too much pride or have never even had just genuine people in their life say, hey, I'll give you with nothing in return. Some people have literally had to, we can go there, have sex for different things or sell drugs or compromise something in order to gain. So they have trust issues. A lot of times when we look at young people, the need for feeling adapted, the need for feeling reassured, the comfort, because we don't have
And being
dialect
part
in
of
our
being accepted and being part of
and we don't
something.
have dialect anymore. We've allowed generational curses to go on in families that say, don't talk about it. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And so in my generation, I'm kind of seeing us pull back that layer more to speak about it. But at the same time, it's not in the depths of how is this affecting you and how is this hurting you? What can I do to do better? And you also have to look at the sphere of influence now. We have music that says kill, shoot, do this, do that.
Mhm.
These people don't live those lives, but you listen to it, and what you listen to, you can become. It starts to be part of your internal and external actions, thoughts, reactions before you know it. So, in the midst of anger, if I've never been taught how to deal with my anger, but I remember that song says, shoot him, kill him, I'm gonna pull my gun,
That's
or
what
I'm
I
gonna
told.
think that's what I need. And
I was
so,
looking. I was talking to a group the other day, and you. I hate interrupting you because
it's
you're
okay,
moving
because I
right.
tell you, I can do this all night.
That's right. You're good. You're good. We're absolutely great in terms of the information that we're sharing, because as I listen to you, we're recognizing the need. When folk, I was listening to a broadcast not long ago, and they were talking about law enforcement and the need for mental health advocates or mental health resources, because some of the people walking our streets are not there because they chose to do it. There are individuals who were once professionals. There are individuals who may have um, faced a trauma in their life that wasn't resolved, that they didn't deal with. We look and say, well, he ought to. We don't know that. We don't know what's going on inside those people's minds. And sometimes their actions, we look at the behaviors, we look at or the action, but we don't look at what's underlying. And so if our only response is to the reaction without addressing what those other needs are, without getting at the root or the foundation of those problems, then we're merely putting band-aids on a wound that's much bigger than we can imagine, and the impact is going to be much greater. October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You said a moment ago, and I don't know if this is going to be exclusive to our community, but there was a time when folks said, what goes on in this house stays in this house, and you kept your mouth closed. You just didn't get in other people's business.
Mhm.
But we're coming to, and perhaps it is generational. We're at a point where we people don't mind talking and sharing their truths or sharing their stories, not because I just want to get out here and put my business in the street, but because it helps others to identify, and it helps
Mhm.
us to empower them to seek the help they need. Whether during Domestic Violence Awareness Month or even mental health awareness, we said it's okay not to be okay. If
Yeah.
something happened, it's okay to say something, because only when you say something can you get the help that you need, or can those resources be identified for you. You mentioned, and I know that it was in your on your profile because I want to talk about another of your ministries outside of corrections. But you talked about being a domestic violence survivor. What brought you to the point where you can say that out loud, where you don't have an issue saying this is what happened, but this is who I am. This was the journey or the path that I took because I am a survivor. There are a whole lot of women and men who can't
Hmm.
say they survived domestic violence, but you did. What brought you? How did that journey bring you to where you are today in terms of your advocacy?
So I'll go back. A lot of people thought that when my mom passed, that was my first encounter, and that was probably the thing that brought me the most attention. But I had actually been married prior, and I went through 5 long years of fighting, of trying to advocate for myself, and that's when I really learned about Mississippi domestic violence, the resources for women. And it got to a point, I would never call my husband's name, but he was a law enforcement official. And that battle in itself is a whole nother
The
fight.
bulge, right?
And so I learned because I had heard other women, and it's, even in prison, when I had heard people say I got a charge for domestic violence, I had heard so many cliches and stories around it. But until I counted myself, I really learned like the biasness. I learned when I used to call the police and they would show up and nobody would do anything to him because they knew him, or the sheriff's department because they knew him. Or when I had a video of what he had done to me and I played it in the courtroom and the judge gave him anger management that he barely even completed. And then we went back before the same judge when I was trying to get a restraining order. He said, I just wanted a restraining order to get a divorce, to keep him away from me. And so there were people who were in the church with me who knew what was going on. It was no secret. Um, I really, really went through. There were places that I turned to as far as family. They would, be gatekeepers and give them access to me again. So it got to the point where I was like, I don't even care anymore. If I have to leave my house and go to a shelter and start over, I will. And I remember Googling and researching, there was really no place to go. And then I had my daughters. So, well, I initially, when we first got together, I only had one daughter. And then in the marriage, that's when I got my second daughter. So even when I had my first daughter, because it had started then, and I contributed to just one night of he never really drank in the beginning. So he had one night where he got intoxicated. And so when it happened that first time, it was life changing, but at the same time, my compassion, I also working off of wounds that I had not healed from. I listened. I'm sorry. I was just I'll never do it again. The things that you would normally hear in those type of situations, and so that was kind of the bridge that smoothed things over. But as time went on, and like I said, trying to advocate for myself and kind of hitting stumbling blocks. And when you get married, the law does not care. Everything is theirs. So there is no get out of my house. There is no get off of my property. And when the police show up, like I said, it's your word versus mine. And in my situation, he had the upper hand because he knew the local law enforcement. He knew certain judges. And so during my journey of trying to find like resources, people who would just pay for me to go get a hotel, people who would put me up in a shelter, I saw how limited we were. And I started realizing then, like, this is the fight that I know if God ever brings me out of, I'm going to push for. And I'm going to make sure that I tell my story because at the time, I literally, they say life and death is in the power of the tongue, and the tongue is something powerful. You can manifest some things. And so I had heard so many stories about women in my family before who had been through domestic violence. And I always used to kind of, I'm not going to say boast, but I always used to say, man, everybody been through it but me. I said that religiously. Everybody went through it but me. And then the situation happened where the door opened for me to go through it. So now I had just become the very thing that I was, almost using to separate myself from. And so when it happened, I said, well, God, something is up. And I realized it's a generational curse. When you don't heal and the next person doesn't heal and the next person doesn't heal, you look for relationships, you look for people to do that. And when you are healed, your vision, it clears. Your eyes, you can hear different. You see people at a whole nother level as opposed to what you would have when you just wanted a companion. You didn't wait to see if that was the right companion. You didn't wait to see if that was a person God sent. You just saw somebody attractive, or you heard a couple things that they said, and you took that and ran with it because you were so willing to follow how you felt instead of what was ordained for your life. And so I couldn't understand because he went to church and he knew the Bible, and it just seemed right. Like literally the first day we met, he said, "I'm gonna marry you," and I was like, I never heard it. But for most of my life, I didn't think that marriage was ever goal for me because I really didn't see a lot of effective marriages in my family. And I had heard so many word curses spoke over me about, oh, all men cheating, don't worry about it, and you'll never stop. It was never just something at the forefront of my heart. So when somebody shows up and they saying all this stuff, and my daughter at the time, she was around one, and they bonded, and it just seemed so right. But understanding at the end of the day, the enemy also knows what you like. And you
Right.
will attract and you will manifest what you are. So at that point in time, I can honestly look back and say I was still broken. I had mama daddy wounds. I had some things within myself that were not right. And so when I saw those same things in him, I was easily able to identify it in him, but not me. And it took me going through it. It took me praying. It took the heavens to open up for me to finally get a divorce in 2018. But when it happened, it was just life changing. That's when I started realizing you needed some work too. There were some things in you that because you had not closed doors to, or you had not healed from, or you had not reflected on, this is why you are allowing, this is why you jumped in this relationship, this is why you connected to this person. He played on my compassion a lot, and narcissism is a real thing. You really have to study those traits in order to identify them, because they are magnets when it comes to brokenness and broken people. So a lot of the things that I would share with him about what I saw, how I felt, and upbringing, he used those to be
Fuel,
keys.
that was fuel for his fire.
Yes,
And I'm
ma'am.
glad that you were willing to share because there may be someone listening. If it's not a woman who's listening tonight, you might know of someone who's in a situation because the courage to walk away, the courage to leave, the courage to say, okay, that's it, and the ability to walk away with your life and the life of your children. Because if we turn the news on now, there are some individuals, and I will issue this disclaimer: we know that men are also may
Hmm.
also be victims of domestic violence, but right now, as we speak to whoever you are, but as we speak to women, sometimes it's more difficult, or it appears more difficult for women to say, that's it. I have to get out. I have to save myself. And that takes courage. And everybody does not have the mind to do that. Everybody is not at a place where they can do that. And if you need help, we have to encourage our sisters, get the help you need. Find it. You were in a situation where, like you said, he had the upper hand, particularly when it came to, because your first resource would be law enforcement. In that regard, he had the upper hand, but you still found the courage to do what you needed to do.
And I think more than anything, fighting against the spirit of shame. Because even when I got out of my divorce and I would go places, I feel like everybody knew my business or was looking at me or this is that thing. But I know there was the enemy now. Because if I would have stayed in the bondage of shame, I would never be able to be vocal about it now. And I've ran into so many people over the years when I tell my story and they say, oh my God, and I went through the same thing and yada and third. And I realized, like, this is the whole purpose of it. There is nothing that is not intentional in your life. If you don't open up your mouth, if you don't share to people, other people will never come out. So I'm not ashamed about anything that I've ever done. And that's why I love transparency. The devil can't shame me about nothing I done already told or I came out of and I made it. And the
Right.
thing was, even with my mom's situation, like, I literally went through periods and seasons to where I would wake up here broken in the house, standing over me, guns, knives. I had been dangled over a bridge before. Just so much had occurred. And so even with the situation with my mom, when I made it out of my marriage, I knew God was with me. Because I had been through too many physical altercations. So I really had no fear. So therefore shame can't live with me because I've already basically conquered dying. That's what most people fear. And so when the situation happened with my mom, I said, Lord, I made it out again. So what do I have to fear? I don't fear people. I don't fear man. I don't fear stages. This is not too much that can intimidate me or scare me. And then on top of that, you go and you talk and hang around people that most people would
Would
run
not.
through the
Right.
door who are criminal records, and you can have such compassion. So I'm like, Miss, like, you walk around the devil's dungeon every day. What is there to fear? And so that created like momentum with boldness with me. So therefore, I'm not really afraid to speak my mind or to say what it is or tell my story. And there's so many people who have gone through those same experiences, but that's how they stay unlocked because they won't open up their mouth. And healing can only take place if I coach you through, if I give you the blueprint, if I tell you. So if I
Right.
keep walking around saying everything is fine and nobody's perfect, everybody has a story. I put my skeletons on the table. I opened my own doors because I was determined. I made a promise with God. I said, Lord, if you bring me out of this and you teach me how to heal, I promise you, I tell every other woman that I know. And so that's my life's mission every day. And I feel like it's no woman left behind with me. And so when I look at my generation or the people behind me, I see that girl. I know what brokenness look like. I was her and I masked it for a long time. I put clothes on it. I smiled behind it. I know what it looks like to be really insecure, but you strut on and you pretend. I know what it looks like to be an attention seeker. I know what it looks like to need validation. I've been that person. And so I want people to come out of that because that's the only time, going back to my mom again, where you can be fully functional. I never wanted to be fully functional for my children because otherwise I'm still allowing that root and that seed to be in my bloodline. I teach them every day. Now, regardless of what they do, because I tell them all the time, which I do is not a reflection of my parenting. Because sometimes I don't know. I don't know about those girls, but for the
They
most
pick
part,
another. Let's say they pick another path. But you know what? I'm looking at your Facebook page, and anybody who visits the page, the header says she is strong. Her. So you and I wanted to talk to you tonight, not only based on the topics, but based on your passion for working with and ministering to. I keep saying working with. I don't want to say that because it is a ministry to women. Whether you're in the correctional space or whether you're in the space letting women know you are that strong her. You're that strong her, but letting others know and helping them to find that strong her within. Because then that empowers and equips us to move in whatever space we're standing in, and in whatever place that we're in. And I believe that as we continue to have conversations, as we continue to say out loud those things that we once whispered, then we are empowering each other. We empower each other to not only have the conversations, but to seek the help that's needed. We've got about 3 minutes, and I want to pause again to thank Women for Progress Media because we've been doing Social Action Sundays for a minute under the auspices of the Greenwood Ittabina Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And when we were given the opportunity to sort of spread our wings, and to appear on this platform with Women for Progress in Mississippi, for me it was ideal because it then opens the door for us to reach more, to
mm-hmm.
expand our reach, and to share the powerful messages and powerful stories. We've got about, again, 2 or 3 minutes left. If you had to leave, what would you like to leave with those listening, to us this evening? What is your message? What would be your part?
I personally just feel like I'm on a clarion call to bring back compassion. And so if I had to leave with anything, it would be that every day of your life extend grace and compassion. We extend the grace, but we often cross out the compassion. And the compassion part is what says it could have been me, or I know somebody that has done it, has been there, has seen those dark days, and I still want to extend the grace and my hand to help them come out. And so it's not always about us. It's truly about leaving legacies. And we can only do that when we are effective in our change in our communities, in our societies, in our homes, and our families. And most of that comes with having that work done on the inside so that it can shine on the outside. I mean, so but most of my life, my mission, I want my legacy to be that little lady. She was really nice, helpful. She always extended her hand because it could have been me, but the grace of God covered me and kept me, and just understanding He put me here for purpose. So we are the church, and the church is not always behind the wall. The church has to come outside. We are the ecclesia, so we have to do the work, and that only comes with being a service hearted person that only comes with putting service first, and it only comes with putting pride aside.
Again, thank you so much. On this Social Action Sunday, my guest is the phenomenal Michel'le McDowell of Greenwood, Mississippi. That's one of Greenwood's jewels. But tonight we talked about our ministry to women in the correctional system, what happens with them when they've left that system, when they come back, how we can minister to them, how we can serve, and domestic violence awareness. Those stories are interwoven in her life. But our prayer is that something she has said, something we've shared, will empower, inspire you in your walk. This has been Social Action Sundays. Have a blessed rest of your evening.